שלום לכולם, שמי פיני גלינקביץ', אני מנהל את הרשות העירונית לעלייה וקליטה בעיריית ירושלים. אנחנו עוסקים בעידוד עלייה לעיר ובקליטה מיטבית של העולים בעיר. ירושלים, בירת ישראל, עיר הנצח, העיר שחוברה לה יחדיו והעיר שעושה את כולנו חברים. ירושלים קולטת עולים מכל רחבי העולם, ובעיקר עולים דוברי אנגלית שמוצאים בה את המקום, משתלבים בחיי הקהילה ויוזמים פעולות ואירועים. אני מזמין אתכם להצטרף לאירוע אונליין פתוח לכולכם שיוזמת OU, תורה ירושלים. האירוע יתקיים במשך 3 ימים בצורה וירטואלית. אתם מוזמנים להצטרף, יהיו שם סדנאות, הרצאות, פעולות מעניינות ומרתקות בנושא ירושלים ובכלל. לכל המעוניינים, גם בנושא של עלייה לעיר, אנחנו כאן לרשותכם, נשמח להיות בקשר ולתת את כל המידע, העזרה, ולעזור לכם בכל התהליך הזה. תודה רבה ולהתראות.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. It is really special sitting here in Yerushalayim. Such a meaningful week, Aseres Yimei Tshuva, where we're all trying to prepare for Yom Kippur, a moment where we're going to be standing, each one in their own unique circumstances this year, and really standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowing exactly what we're davening for this year. And in order to make sure our day is going to be a lot more meaningful, a lot more focused, here in Torah Yerushalayim, we decided to have an additional panel that is going to be focused on leadership roles that English speakers that made Aliyah have taken here in Israel. I must be honest that it's a real distinguished honor to be sitting here together with such incredible people. We have Rabbi Kalman Samuels, Aliza Pilichowski, as well as Rabbi Chana Henkin. And we're going to be hearing from each and every one of them about how they got to Israel, what they've done here, as well as so many of their accomplishments. For us here at the OU, we see a certain trend. And the trend is that, Baruch Hashem, many people are moving to Israel. Many people are now thinking about moving to Israel. Maybe many people already, Baruch Hashem, moved to Israel and are living in Israel. And what we find is that our community is extremely active in North America. Extremely active, whether they're coming from Canada or the United States, England, New Zealand, South Africa, wherever they're coming from. They're very active in their community. But then something happens. They come to Israel, and there's a certain feeling like, oh, I'm in Israel, so now the Israelis have to do the leadership roles. They have to take upon themselves the leadership roles. And there's a certain feeling that there's a back burner that I automatically have to go on to because I don't speak the language, because I don't understand the culture, because I'm coming from a different world. And the people that we're sitting here with today broke that stigma, broke that mindset. And our sitting here today, Erev Yom Kippur, is literally to come and say, you know something? Whether you already made Aliyah and you're living in Israel, or whether you're living overseas and you're planning on making Aliyah, or whether you're still in your community in America and you plan on, or anywhere else in the world and you're planning on staying there for the next near future, the necessity and the need for us to take leadership positions is crucial. We're going to be sitting here this afternoon, and we're going to be going through, their personal stories and really understanding from them what got them to do these incredible things here in Israel that they're doing. And therefore, I'm going to ask each and every one of them to take, about 4 minutes to briefly introduce themselves, and then to speak about ultimately what motivated them and led them to the decision to take upon themselves these leadership roles. So we're going to start this panel with Rabbi Kalman Samuels, who is the head of Shalva and also founded Shalva.
Yes.
Vakasha, Rabbi Kalman.
Thank you, Avi. A pleasure to be here. Let me give you a little bit of background, and I think that will allow us to get into our subject. Indeed, my name is Kalman Samuels, and I was actually born in Vancouver, Canada, a child of the 60s, totally secular, nice Jewish family, certainly no interest in ever living in Israel. And as a matter of fact, I didn't have much interest in visiting Israel. At the age of 18, I had a lot of academic scholarships. I was on my way to study in France after 1-year university. My mother asked me to visit Israel. I put up a fight, but eventually I said, okay. I went for 2 weeks, and I did what every non-religious kid does in Israel when he visits. I worked on kibbutzim. I slept on the beach in Eilat, and I visited, of course, the main sites. And interestingly enough, after 2 weeks, I was questioning what in the world is it that I'm feeling here, and what is it that's ticking here that I must find out more about. Against my father's wishes, I pushed off my trip to France for 6 weeks. I pushed it off till the end of the summer. I pushed it off for another year. And in the meantime, I searched, I studied, I became religious. And by the end of that year, I had made a decision that what I really wanted to do was to follow this path and become a rabbi, and I thought to work in academia. En route, I met my beautiful wife, Malki. We married. We had a beautiful daughter. We had a beautiful son named Yossi. And at the age of 11 months, Malki took Yossi for a vaccination that, unbeknown to the public at that time, the Ministry of Health was having a severe problem with that particular batch. It wasn't, in quotes, a regular vaccination. It turned out to be tainted, and many children were injured. And my son, Yossi, became blind, deaf, and severely hyperactive. Clearly, our young lives got flipped on their heads. We struggled. We couldn't get the proper medical information we needed. We went to New York looking for medical help, and we wound up staying for 5 years. Yossi was enrolled in a school for the blind in Midtown Manhattan, and we learned the hard facts that he'll never see again. His hearing is on the way to being lost, and his disabilities beyond that were there to stay. I went into the computer field, did very well, worked for major corporations, and had a bright future in that field available to me. And we knew, according to everyone who we spoke to, that the only place to be for Yossi was in New York with all the facilities available. In spite of that, we understood also that we wanted to raise our children in Israel, and against all odds, we made a decision we're going back. It was, as someone at my work said to me, insane to think that I would leave where I was and go back to Israel, where I didn't know what I would be doing in terms of work and had nothing planned in a real secure way. We came back, and several years later, I went into the computer field here. Several years later, Yossi had a major breakthrough in the deaf school to communication, where a deaf teacher put one hand on the table and the other she signed the word shulchan many times over. At one point he lit up and she understood he had just had his Helen Keller moment where he understood communication. That, I was told, could never happen here in Israel, but the fact of the matter, this is where it took place. Our lives changed. My wife, who had made a promise years earlier that if God ever helped Yossi, she would dedicate her life to helping other mothers, sat me down and said, I know exactly what I want to do. I need your help. And over the years, we created Shalva, an organization to help families with children with disabilities. Started with 5 children. 30 years later, it's the largest in the world, both physically and a number of people served. And these are things that we could never, ever have imagined. These are dreams that I never dreamt, not of being religious, not of Yossi having a breakthrough, and not of that breakthrough leading to my being involved in Shalva. As a matter of fact, I wrote a book about the subject called Dreams Never Dreamed, and indeed, they were never part of my dreams, but miracles happen in the land of Israel.
Extremely inspirational. Even though I've heard the story before, every time I hear it, I get goosebumps. And the fact that Yossi today has become a role model for so many is really an inspiration here in Israel. So kol hakavod.
You know what? Kol hakavod l'Hashem. This is things that are beyond us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that incredible introduction.
Thank you, Avi.
We're now going to ask Aliza Pilichowski, who is the mayor of the town of Mitzpeh Yericho, a town that I get to visit many times. I've got family living there, And really, some of the most spectacular views of the state of Israel are really in Mitzpeh Yericho. And a beautiful yeshuv that Aliza has, while just making Aliyah a little over 6 years ago, has literally taken over the place and is leading it into becoming so much more of what Mitzpeh Yericho could be. Aliza, let's hear a few words from you.
Hi, everyone. I can't express the feeling that I have sitting here on the rooftop overlooking Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh. You know, when we think about our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, to have this dream of sitting in a Makom Torah for advanced studies for women, sitting amongst people who have made such incredible contributions to Medinat Yisrael, and just looking at history in the unfolding right here is absolutely breathtaking. So I'd like to pause and really experience that and really share that with you. If you're not sitting in a rooftop in Yerushalayim, to really feel that this incredible pivotal moment in Jewish history that we're zocha to be a part of. So as Rabbi Berman said, my name is Aliza Pilichowski. My husband and I and 6 children made Aliyah from Boca Raton, Florida. We were blessed to be a part of a beautiful community of the Boca Raton Synagogue with Rabbi Goldberg, and we were very fortunate to see a real community with real leadership. And we were able to work for Rabbi Goldberg and to see the incredible, what a real community should look like. Before that, we had lived in Beverly Hills. We worked at Beth Jacob Congregation under the leadership of Rabbi Stephen Weil. We were able to see tremendous change and vision, and again, the building of a community. And when I was living in Beverly Hills, one of our colleagues, Rabbi Jason Weiner, suggested that I enter into chaplaincy. And when we moved to Florida, I studied chaplaincy, and I became a chaplain, and that was the natural progression. We were working in community work and klal work, and we naturally progressed that I would become a chaplain. And I thought when we made Aliyah that was the end of that portion of our lives. You know, shuls are very different in Israel. It's not a community center. It doesn't have the programming that it does in America. And we thought that part of our lives was going to be closed, and we'd be opening new chapters. And very fortunately, I was able to continue in chaplaincy, and I continue working in chaplaincy today. And shortly after that, I was approached to join the Vad Aguda of Mitzpeh Yericho, and loosely translated as a city council of the yeshuv, and I was a member. And then when the head of the city council resigned, I came in, and then shortly after that, we had new elections, and I continued. And it's an incredible opportunity to be amongst people who are really making a difference in Medinat Yisrael. The whole concept of Yehuda v'Shomron, to live in the biblical heartland of Israel, to be able to wake up every morning and look out at Yericho, to be able to be involved in building roads and houses and gardening and parks and schools, and the list goes on. And you know, I always make reference to the song Ani Baniti Bayit Be'eretz Yisrael. I am a part of that. And no, I don't do it on my own, and I have a lot of help from many different areas. But to be able to be a part of the building of Medinat Yisrael and Yehuda v'Shomron is something that's so special that I'm able to be a part of it. And it's not something unique to me. There are many people that have an opportunity to do it. And all we need to do is stand up and take that opportunity.
Incredible. Ultimately, many people are leaders in America, right? Why is it that you felt that you can continue doing that here in Israel, and you didn't go and look for a job that, you know, most Americans come here and take, whether it's working overseas or it's where, you know, via communication or coming to Israel and taking some other job that'll just be a parnasa of your house? In other words, what was inside you that said, no, I have to continue on in that leadership position?
It was not in the plans. It was not in the plans that we would continue in that. Israel is different. The community makeup, the shul makeup, the demographics, the language, everything is a challenge. And the culture, the cultural language, not just the Hebrew language. And when opportunity knocked, and I said, maybe in my small way, I can do something, I jumped. And I daven, as we approach Yom Kippur, I daven and I call out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I need his help. I need to be able to continue to grow and to give and to build.
We're now going to move over to Rabbi Chana Henkin. First of all, Kvod Achsanya. But what I would really like to hear from Rabbi Chana Henkin is so much about, first of all, she's been here for many more years than myself or Aliza Pilichowski, probably a little less than Rabbi Kalman Samuels. But she ultimately has seen the English-speaking community come to Israel and ultimately integrate themselves into Israel in many different ways. And still she decided to create Nishmat, which we all know and are very familiar with. But Rabbi Chana Henkin, if you could please give us a little bit of your brief experience.
Gemar Chatima Tova to everyone. We've been on a trajectory since Rosh Chodesh Elul. We're about to reach the summit. May all of our tefillot be received with rachamim before Adon Kol, and may this usher in, may this Yom Kippur usher in a year of better health, Be'ezrat Hashem, of good health for Klal Yisrael and for the whole world. I'm debating, Rabbi Berman, where I start my story with. First, I don't enjoy telling my story. I enjoy being a private person and being surrounded by individuals who are doing a wonderful job. Our Aliyah was, I think, not across the beaten track. When we moved to Israel, we didn't move into an Anglo community. We moved to Beit Sha'an. We debated when we came. We're a young family. We had a newborn baby, and we debated between Beit Sha'an and Eilat. We thought to ourselves, we can be chalutzim for a couple of years. We wanted to do something. We wanted to contribute to the country, and we felt that neither of those places, both of which are quite warm, by the way, we felt that both of them, both places would be a good place to start out as a young rabbinic couple. That's what we would have been in the United States. My husband is a Rav. Had we stayed in the United States, our lives would have been the lives of a rabbinic couple, and that's the way we viewed ourselves in Israel. We didn't think of ourselves as American. We thought of ourselves in relation to the community, and where could we make a contribution to the community. That's what a young rabbinic couple thinks about. You think about who are going to be the guests that you're going to bring into your home on Shabbat, and what are you going to do in your community. When we moved into Beit Sha'an, we were the only English speakers. Our family is a Hebrew-speaking family right now, not just my grandchildren. We have, thank God, 6 children and a tribe of grandchildren, but not just the grandchildren. Our family is a Hebrew-speaking family. So the route was somewhat unorthodox, but I think if I have to find a common denominator between different things that I've done in my life, it's generally been unplanned. I think we hear that in Rabbi Samuels, and we hear that in Aliza. It's generally been unplanned. It's generally been that I see something going wrong, and I say to myself, someone's got to fix this. And if there's no one else who's around to fix it, so you got to get up and you've got to do something. The Beit Sha'an years were good years and they were mixed years. We thought we'd be in the community for 2, 3, 4 years. We stayed for 10 years until our children needed a different kind of schooling, and then we were forced to move out. Otherwise, we wouldn't have moved out. My husband was a Rav in the area. I started work in the school. I'm going to make a long story short. The first time I needed to use the mikveh was on a Friday night. I get to the mikveh, the building is dark, it's locked. I went feeling around the building. I said, there's got to be some way of getting in. I discovered when I went out into the street to ask someone, I discovered the mikveh lady closes on Friday afternoon and asks people to come early. So what do you say to yourself when that happens? I solved my personal problem the way I needed to solve my personal problem. I said, someone's got to do something about this. There's a Chilul Hashem going on here. So it wasn't a question of American, Israeli. I didn't think of myself as an American. I was a member of the community. And something needed to be done. So that eventually it evolved into what was then the pinnacle of my career, getting the mikveh lady reassigned. Rabbi Samuel is going to be able to understand what I'm saying. Reassigned to serve tea in the Moetza Datit. We had a profession of that sort in Israel going back 5 decades. She would clean up and she would serve tea. And I brought in a young mikveh lady who was responsible to me. How did I do that? My husband was a member of the Moetza Datit. He was a Rav in the area, but he was a member of the Moetza Datit. And basically, I went there and I said, listen, I'm going to make a fuss. And I'm going to make a loud fuss until you give me the keys and you let me do something about this, because there's a Chilul Hashem. You're a group of men who are sitting here and you don't understand what's going wrong. I'm a woman. I understand what's going wrong, and I'm going to take this over. And they let me do it. And then I came back to them and I said, you don't need to pay me for my time, but I want you to give me a budget for coffee and cake. And I don't know, sometimes in life you have a moment of hashra'ah, you have a moment of inspiration, siyata dishmaya. I went around to every ganenet in town, because at that time we were a town of about, at that point, around 13,000 people. So not a large community at that point. It has grown. I went around to every ganenet and I said, I'd like to offer you a cultural evening with, I put together a panel of 2 other women with me over coffee and cake. And for them, it was a cultural opportunity with the mothers. And through the gananot, every ganenet, except for 2 who are from Beit Alpha and Nir David, every ganenet, whether religious or secular, accepted with pleasure. I got the mikveh up from 6 women a night to 26 women a night within 3 years. It was, our family was growing. I took my kids with me. They grew up in the Ganei Yeladim, playing in the Ganei Yeladim, and they got cake without the coffee. And you learn that, you just go and you do something. During the Beit Shan years, I think I did something else that was fairly similar. I was teaching in the high school for a period of years until I gave up. I became the assistant principal of the high school, and I gave them an ultimatum: either you do it, either we restructure or I'm going to move on to other things. And we didn't restructure, so I moved on. But when I was working in the high school, when I entered the high school, the principal said to me, I want 2 kids to get their bagrut. And I said, I looked at him, I was a little confused. At that point, I was really green. And I said, how many kids are you giving me? And he said, listen, I want you to stay here. I don't want you to flee the town. If I tell you that I want 10 kids to pass the bagrut, you're going to flop and you're going to flee. So I'm telling you 2. And I said to myself under my breath, Buster, I'm going to teach you a lesson. I mean, how do you tell me that I'm supposed to fail 26 human beings and that their life's trajectory is supposed to be on the margins? These are all, it turned out that my year 2 kids failed. All the others passed. It had to do with caring and with figuring out what's going wrong. And I think if you fast forward to our family in Yerushalayim, and you fast forward to the Yoatzot Halakha, it was the same thing. Yes, I was the head of a school, but I wasn't planning the Yoatzot Halakha. I had my own history in Tarat HaMishpacha in Beit Sha'an, and I met a friend on the street, and she told me how she started crying when she saw me. Her life had turned upside down. Having to do with Tarat HaMishpacha, I realized what the problem was, but I also realized that the problem wasn't just hers. The problem was that of many, many women. So again, I changed my schedule for the day. I hadn't expected to do what I did that day. I went down into the Beit Midrash, and I said to Rabbi Yaakov Verhaftig, listen, I knew my husband was behind me with this because we had spoken about that women need to be there for other women. I went to him and I said, listen, we're starting a program and you're going to be the head of the program. And he said, okay. So once I had that, I had a circuit of rabbis that I went to and a circuit of doctors that I went to. The final one was Rav Menachem Burstein of Pu'ah at about 12:30 a.m. And I went and I told them, here's what we're doing. We want you to be part of it. We're now about 400,000 questions later. We have something like 140-something Yoatzot Halakha here in Israel and all over the world. But the point of this and the message that I'd like to give before Yom Kippur to anyone who's listening is I don't think it's about me. I don't think it's about saying I want to be a leader. It's about looking at the community, and if you could do this in America, you can do this in Israel, and you should do this in Israel. If you see something going wrong, tikkun is your responsibility. There are things that each of us can do. The American Jewish community, the American Orthodox community, is a very active community. People take responsibility, they do things, they make a difference. We have the privilege, after 2,000 years of having returned to Zion, we're building a country, and that confers a responsibility upon every person. What can you do to help your community? It's not who do you think you are, it's what needs to be done and what can you do to contribute.
Well, thank you. Inspirational. It's there are different personalities, and I think that we all face challenges. And in a minute, we'll be talking to each and every one of you about a unique challenge that you faced when making Aliyah and coming here, and what it took inside you to overcome that challenge, right? And what guidance you can give others to try to overcome those challenges. But I think that when you're looking at a challenge such as you mentioned in Bet Sha'an, many people would just say, something fine. This is the minhag hamakom. I'm not going to start arguing with minhag hamakom, right? Or there's a motzah datit here. There's a rav. Who am I to argue with the rav?
Yeah, but that's exactly what I think the American background enabled me to do. I grew up in a country where people take civic responsibility. A part of that is probably imprinted in the personality, but it's also a trait that American Orthodox Jews have. American Orthodox Jews build mikvaot, they build communities, they build schools, they take responsibility.
What you're saying is extremely interesting, because the mentality here in Israel and the way of life here in Israel is very much that the government ultimately is responsible, right? Everybody sees a problem. Who can I speak to in the government that's going to take care of that problem? You as a mayor, I'm sure, is very familiar with this. Kalman, you running Shalva, I'm sure you're in daily contact with the Sar Revacha or whoever it is that you got to deal with, and I'm sure you as well. But that mentality of because there's a state of Israel and there's a Jewish government, and somebody knows somebody in the government that we could talk to. There's somewhat of a feeling like, oh, it's the government's job. And therefore, when you bring up the topic of civic responsibility, right, it tends to get lost because I think it's more similar in Europe, where the government ultimately takes care of everything, and the people just have to, take more of a following of what the government is doing. Here in Israel, we are going to move the country forward, and with the OU, we see that you look around Yerushalayim, and I took one day with my staff, and we started calling every Minhal Kilati in Yerushalayim and other places, and we tried to speak to somebody in English. Right, I'm fluent in Hebrew. I made Aliyah when I was 9. Right. Moving to Yeshiv similar to Mitzpeh Yericho, moving to Kedumim, right? So I had to jump in the deep water and learn Hebrew very fast. But I'm trying to speak only English and get a hold of somebody that can give an answer, right? And talk about the programming that they're having. And it's only after I was able to bring the municipality, right, the recordings and show them, listen, there's nothing happening for the English-speaking community. And that's why the OUisrael Center is so important, that they said, okay, something, we got to change things. And I got to give them tremendous credit that they've changed the website in the area. The Minhalim all have English websites now, and you have at least a couple that you can get answers in English and this programming, but it's us coming over and taking that civic responsibility that you're talking about, right, and pushing it to the next level here in Israel, right. Now, that does not come without the challenges. That does not come with, unique experiences that bring us to a stage where we're asking, something, is it really worth it? Is this a wall that I could overcome, or is this a wall that I, am just ultimately going to, stand on one side and not be able to get to the other side? The other side. Rabbi Kalman, maybe you could tell us about one of those experiences that for you were, something, maybe I'm walking up a steep hill, but I'm going to get over this.
Well, the actual coming back from New York for us was, as I mentioned, something that we were advised against by friends, by anybody we knew, that we wouldn't make it. We had a drive. We felt that we'd done what we had to do there, and we wanted to live our life in Israel. When we established Shalva in 1990, I did go to the municipality, asked for some help, and to be quite honest, for the first decade, we were, I don't want to use the word mocked, but we were absolutely not understood. Why are you talking about family? Just give therapy for the child. And so we didn't have a penny of support, not from the municipality and not from the government, for the first decade of Shalva's life. But as Malki used to say, that's your strength. You're building it the way we want to build it, without being confined to their confinements. And we created something very different. And in 2005, Shalva already had another bit of a center of its own. And my director of education at that time came running into my little office. I continued to work in the computer field for the first 11 years. And then at some point, Shalva grew to the point that I had to make a choice. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start doing what I have to do for Shalva full time. She came crying into my office that the Ministry of Social Welfare had copied, literally verbatim, paragraphs of text in English about the importance of family and caring for families with children with disabilities, and put it on their website. And she said, this is like a horrific thing, and I started laughing. And she says, what are you laughing about? I said, can you imagine all these years they've been mocking this to some degree, and they've come to the point where this has now become their message. This is couldn't think of anything better. And that is precisely what happened. That did become their message, and I'm only too happy it did. But the focus changed. So what we had been talking about, preaching, trying to explain to people, and did fall on deaf ears, ultimately had impact. And today, that is the message. Anyone who talks differently in the world of disabilities is he's now the stranger. So I think one has to go against the flow. One has to believe, if you undertake to do something, that there's a reason why you're doing it. As the Rebbitzin said, you're here to fill a void. Something comes up, others have not done it, and you say often to yourself, but why me? There's smarter people, there's more experienced people. Because life brings to us experience and challenges that we learn from, and we then become knowledgeable that, hey, I have to help this woman, I have to help this family. We started with 5 kids. We were overwhelmed. But when people bang on your door all day, every day, saying, I have a child, a neighbor, a nephew that needs your facilities, things happen. So I think what's really important is to be true to your belief, whatever that might be that you feel is important. And I do feel that everybody who comes here can make that difference. Everybody can find something of meaning, take it up, whether that's with another group, whether that's individually. And I think there's something in Israel, and I say it again, that Rebbetzin said it earlier, Siyata Deshmaya, help of heaven, that it is something you can almost touch in this country. And with all the challenges, we all find ourselves somehow on the other side of those barriers, having built families and moving forward.
Yefem Mod. Aliza, 6 years is a long time, but it's a short amount of time compared to those that are sitting on your two sides. So I'm going to ask you to focus more on challenges that Olim are having. You know, Rabbi Kalman is talking more about the structure of the government and how to deal with, you know, creating a new system to build an organization. And I'm sure you can give me many stories about Mitzvah Yericho and you know, the challenges that you have in passing Taba and passing this and passing that. But specifically, if we go down to the incredible Pilichowski family and moving from Boca Raton, Florida to Israel, maybe you can point out a certain challenge that you had and how you overcame it that can inspire those that might be listening to us right now that are trying to overcome certain hurdles.
So I definitely identify with challenges of making Aliyah. That being said, they're very, very, very small in comparison to what you get. To have the schus of waking up and taking your kids to school and say, wow, look how clearly you see Hare Amon v'Moav this morning. Look out at Yericho. You're living in the biblical heartland of Israel. There's nothing that you could possibly imagine for a Jew to be more natural than to live in Eretz Yisrael. It's the most natural fit possible. Are there challenges? There are challenges everywhere in the world. We had challenges when we lived in Beverly Hills. We had challenges when we lived in Boca Raton. And we have challenges in Eretz Yisrael. But what we get for living here far surpasses anything else. And it's, you know, I'm very grateful for our years in each of the cities that we've lived in. But to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael is really unparalleled, and you reap such benefits. You know, the Anashim Chashuvim that I'm sitting with have mentioned the uniqueness, the specialness of Eretz Yisrael. We have hashgacha every day. We have the divine providence with us every single day. When I bring groups to mitzvah and I say, look out on the mountains around, there's nothing there. That's what mitzvah should look like. And if you look around mitzvah, the green, the lush, the flowers, the trees, every time we plant a tree, it's Yad Hashem. It's the hand of Hashem allowing that tree to grow. It's crazy that I have lemon trees in my front yard that just grow supernaturally. That's not anything that you can get in any other land in the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us those trees. When we lived in Florida, it was amazing. You drop a seed, and the next year you have a tree. And that's what would happen. That's the way that the land of Florida is created. Mitzvah Yericho is the desert. It's not supposed to happen there. It's purely supernatural. And to be living in that is, I mean, I'm laughing out of pure joy that we're able to see that on a daily basis. So in terms of challenges, I can't point to something that I would say is a specific challenge that we faced moving to Israel. But in terms of benefits and daily pleasures, it's unparalleled. Of course, and of course, you know, we have the little things, and we can all say that they're little. Yes, I have a very heavy American accent. I cannot say a good resh for the life of me, But that's okay. That's okay. I can still ask for what we need for the yishuv. I spoke in front of Bibi. We hosted him in Mitzvah Yericho. I'm happy to welcome many ministers and rabbanim to our town. And I speak with a resh and not a good resh. But that's okay. One day I'll get there.
בעזרת השם. רבנית, בבקשה.
Aliza, your stories brought back memories of two experiences in Beit Sha'an. The first one took place in the high school. They gave me Torah Shabbat Peh. They asked me to teach English, and I said to them, I don't have a degree in English. I'm also not interested in English. I'm a Torah Shabbat Peh teacher. So they said, okay, we'll let you teach Torah Shabbat Peh, but you have to teach English as well. So that lasted for a very short period of time. In any event, since I had a degree in history, they gave me ezgachut. So I walk into a 12th grade class. I'm supposed to be preparing them for bagrut. And one of that class was boys and girls. And one of the boys in the class says to me, what do you think of achuz hachasima? And I needed to say then, here, I'm the teacher for civics. The principal didn't have a college degree. So here I came with a graduate degree. So they put a lot onto my plate. I needed to say to the kids, listen, I didn't grow up here. Tell me what achuz chasima is.
Maybe just explain to our viewers what achuz chasima is, because they might not know.
That in elections, if you don't get a certain minimum number of votes,
there's a threshold that you have to pass.
There's a threshold. You got to pass the threshold. So I needed to ask the kids. The same thing happened to me in Mishnah class that I was teaching for girls. First day I came into class, I said, I can't teach them. They're speaking so quickly that they know more than I do. It took a little while for me to realize that, no, they don't know more than I do, and I need to slow them down. But you need a certain amount of humility in which you're able to say, hold it, I'm not following you. But you're focusing on the task. You're not focusing on yourself, on the language. I think my big challenge probably came about 5 years ago when my son, Harav Eitam Henkin, and my daughter-in-law, Norma, were murdered. And then I needed to make a decision about the direction of life because the family responsibilities became much greater and primary. And at the same time I had built an institution that I suppose as a founder of institution, you build a lot around yourself, and I needed to make a decision of how I was going to reconcile the two. I had very dear friends around me who stepped in that first year in order to help, in order to be there financially with support. Realizing that I was going to travel much, much less. And at the school, thank God, I had good people around me who were able to assume greater responsibilities. But I needed to say to myself, my children's life was devoted to Torah, and I'm not going to back away from doing what I need to do. So you, over time, figure out what's the balance that can work for you. I needed to get up in the Beit Midrash when I returned from Shloshim. The first month, pretty much, we were sorting out things having to do with the children and how the family was going to run and what each grandparent was going to do. But when I returned from Shloshim, I gathered the whole school together in Beit Midrash. And I said to my students and I said to my faculty, I'm here for you. My job hasn't changed. Don't feel that you need to walk past me with a long face. That's not why you're here, and that's not what I want from you. If you have remembrances of my children, because both of them were very much involved in Nishmat, not for that many hours of my son's life, but he was a member of the faculty here. My daughter-in-law also, my daughter-in-law had a graphic a graphic arts business in which she worked out of home, and she employed someone, and she did work for us. So I told them, if you have memories of my children, then come and share them. But otherwise, I want you to smile. I want you to laugh. If you have a problem with your chavruta, come and speak to me. Because I realized they didn't have language. How would they know what they're allowed to say to me? And I wanted them to know that things are going to continue as normal. Now, when I said that, very honestly, did I believe it? Did I feel it? No, I just thought that's what I need to say. And I also told them that I never thought of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an ATM machine. People have asked me, did this shake my faith? And I was confused by the question. Hashem gives us tafkidim. He gives us jobs. He doesn't give us vouchers for a weekend at a 5-star hotel. He gives us challenges, and so you do what you need to do. So, that was a point at which I realized, okay, I need to talk with one voice, even though the moment I walk out of the Beit Midrash, that's not where my mind is going to be. But when I'm in the Beit Midrash, that's where my mind needs to be.
Well, Hashem Yikom Damam. And the moment we're sitting in, a very of Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos Shuvah, is a moment where ultimately we're supposed to look back and look at the past year that we had and try to say, okay, what is it that we wanted to accomplish this past year, whether on a personal level or on an organizational level, whether it has to do with, this challenge or that challenge. Some that we were hoping to be able to accomplish this year that unfortunately we didn't, and we hope to this coming year. Rabbi Kalman.
First of all, I want to thank Rabbi Henkin. The message is so powerful, and I thank you for being who you are and for sharing that message. It's just so powerful and so true.
Rabbi Samuels, excuse me, your whole life is an inspiration to the rest of us.
Rebbitzin, what you've been through is something I wish on nobody, and it's a completely different dimension, and I thank you. I think this year has been a year in which each of us can identify with what challenges, dreams that we had, accomplishments we were going to try and aspire to this year, and it all came crashing down in early March. And for one, on a personal note, but if we're going to talk on a public note on Shalva, there were so many plans in place, and many of them very real, creation of a new center in another location of great need, plans with soldiers, plans with endless things. And we found ourselves, all of us, on a personal note and communal note, that we were shut down. And this has become the struggle, and yes, it's very painful that we were not able to complete and do what we wanted to. And as a matter of fact, we had to put these things on the side, and I don't know if and when they'll ever come back. But they're things we worked on for years. And I think we have to recognize that life is not in our hands. Health is not in our hands. Naturally, we have to do our utmost to v'nishmaltem, to keep our health and be responsible. But things change. And at Shalva, absolutely things changed. We had a very thriving part, apart from the children, a very thriving entity of Cafe Shalva, of events. We had 150,000 visitors a year coming into the new center in the last 4 years from all over the world. The Foreign Ministry would bring them in. And we were there as a model for nations as far as Asia, the Caribbean, the United States, literally the whole world. And this had become a very, very vibrant, upbeat program that in one shot, of course, is not there. So I think truly the message of Yom Kippur for me is knowing that, of course, I have to do mine. But at the end of the day, I have to be prepared that God is going to lead me in whatever directions he leads me. And my responsibility is to try and make the most and turn that situation around to be of benefit to myself, of course, but more importantly, to others. We read that God puts in front of us Chaim and Tov, life and goodness. And Rashi says it's actually the Tov. When we do good, we will have life. The Kli Yakar says something fascinating. He says, nevertheless, why is the word life mentioned before Tov? He says, because we don't intend to do Tov in order to have life. We have life in order to do good. Our life has to be one of always seeking, how can we be of benefit to others? And for me, that is definitely the message of Yom Kippur.
Thank you very much. Given just the fact that we have 5 minutes left, I'm going to ask just in 1 minute if you could talk about your personal...
So in chaplaincy, when we do a write-up after a visit, one of the words that we use very often is ivadaut, uncertainty. And I think that would be the theme of this year. If you would have asked me the same question 1 year ago as we sit before Yom Kippurim, what are we doing? I had a very clear plan. We were building an outdoor soccer field. We were building an indoor gym. We were building a community center. We were building homes. And all of it was very, very clear exactly what our trajectory was, exactly what meetings and what milestones we need to hit by each month. And it was very clear. And then all of a sudden, the world turned over, and we were given different opportunities. And as the rabbi and the Rabbanit have spoken about, this is what we're given. And with whatever opportunity we're given, we take it and we grow from it. I'm very honored that I have an incredible opportunity tomorrow to be sitting in a meeting of how we're going to settle the new wave of Aliyah of North Americans. We're going to be figuring out how we can make that a reality in Mitzvah Yericho, in Yehuda v'Shomron, in Medinat Yisrael, to really change things. Was it in my plans a year ago? Absolutely not. But that's where it is today, and that's where we're going to go with it. And my message on Erev Yom Kippur is to take the opportunities and run with them.
Yesher koach. Rabbanit.
I feel like I have very little to add after what Rabbi Samuels and Aliza said. For me, the year has, outside of family things, which were always present in our family, but outside of that, it's been a kind of a roller coaster. On the one hand, Yoatzot Halacha moved to the forefront as soon as Corona started, having to do with mikveh safety. We, right after Purim, I brought together the leaders of all the arms of Yoatzot Halacha, our hotline, our websites in 4 languages, and all the other tools. And I said, by tonight, we're going to have a website, a Corona-based website, in which we're going to be able to give reliable information. And the questions that have inundated us began then. Within a week, we were overwhelmed, but we didn't make the tonight deadline, but we did it before Shabbos. And the questions having to do with halacha, with quality of life, with safety, with safety in mikvahot. We were getting questions from mikvah attendants all over the world. We were getting questions from women, very, very personal questions, some of them having to do with fertility. And so there, rather than Corona causing us to slow down, it caused us to be inundated, and we needed to marshal the resources. And that's one part of the story. The other part of the story is here we are. We're sitting on the Nishmat roof. We were supposed to be in construction right over there, starting for Erev Pesach, just like Rabbi Samuel's, just like Aliza. All the pieces of the puzzle were in place. Everything, we had all the Ishurim, and this was part of my vision of how I want to leave this school. I believe there needs to be a residential community in an institution that doesn't change its population every year. In a men's yeshiva, it's a kollel. So I'm going to use the same word for lack of another word. I have married students. I want to keep them here. I want them to impact the school. I want to give them the vision, because this is a school that serves not just its population. There's a tremendous amount of outreach going on in the neighborhood, elsewhere in Yerushalayim, and of course the whole arm of Yoatzot Halacha. I want to make sure that this continues for the next generation. How do I do that? So I have, again, for lack of a better word, because there still isn't a word, but I wanted to see the equivalent of a kollel with 10 families. We're supposed to be looking out right here at the married students' housing. And that says to me, okay, I can pass the torch on because I have a fixed population here. It turns itself over every 6 years or 8 years, but I know that the vision is in good hands. So Corona did us in, and now we're asking ourselves, how do we manage to do this right now? How do we put together the means? So there's
one of the many challenges of
one
Corona.
of the many challenges and many privileges. One of the many privileges. Here we are on Erev Yom Kippur. We're privileged. Life is a gift. You have to do something with it.
Torah Yerushalayim last year was 2,200 people. We started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we ended at 2 a.m. with Shlomo Katz Slichos. And it was an absolute high. I remember arriving there at 7 o'clock in the morning, 6:45 in the morning, and leaving there at 3:30 a.m. And I didn't feel like I had to sit for 1 second. It was just like nonstop, like you're on, cloud 7. And then you see COVID come, and you say, oh my gosh, we're not going to be able to do Torah Yerushalayim. And then you look at your staff and you say, what are we doing here? And they come up with this incredible plan. And now, instead of touching 2,200 people in Yerushalayim, we're going to be able to touch many thousands more around the world. And us able to sit here, Erev Yom Kippur, and inspire people all around the world is something that probably if there wasn't COVID, we wouldn't be doing. Yep. So hopefully this will leave Yom Kippur as a much more meaningful day for all those that listen to us today. And we're going to put on the screen the contact information for your organizations and Yishuv so that people can get involved and become more leaders. Obviously, how to contact the OU. Hopefully they already know if they're on the OU website. But Bezrat Hashem, let's hope we meet in Yerushalayim, Yer Kodesh. Bezrat Hashem, as long as they move to Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim, wherever, we're encouraging Jews to move home. And after this panel, we're encouraging them to be leaders. Whether they're still there, they're coming, wherever you are, please be a leader. Thank you so much. Gemar Chatima Tova.
Yachad Israel's purpose is to give an answer to the needs of the disabled and secure their integration into all aspects of life.
זה המקום של יחד. כל פעילות של יחד אני מודה להם.
OUisrael, Judaism, Zionism, responsibility.